All right, good morning and welcome back to the Green Room. Today we have another great podcast for you with Bob DeProspero from SDS Enterprise. So I want to turn it over to him and we'll get his introduction and the introduction about SDS Enterprise, where it fits into probably your model, our business model, and a lot of what Enterprise does compared to a powered by solution. So if you want to go right ahead, go ahead.
Thank you, Harry. Again, my name's Bob DeProspero. I'm with the Enterprise Group at Shooter Detection Systems. We're a company that's owned by Alarm.com. I've been in this industry for 30 plus years, been on both sides of the table when it comes to presenting solutions. I've been with integrators who were selling to end users, and I've represented a number of different manufacturers out there that everything from residential intrusion panels to commercial access control and enterprise level video systems and things such as that.
And now moving to Shooter Detection Systems Enterprise. So I know that we don't hear a lot about that when we're looking at a system, since we mostly fall under the powered by. But what is SDS or Shooter Detection Systems Enterprise?
Well, the nice thing about it is it's the exact same technology or the same sensor that is in the powered by solution, but it really comes down to what the response is once there is an accurate detection. And what we do is we utilize the existing infrastructure of the systems that customers have already invested in. So if a customer has an enterprise level access control system that's tied to a video management system, then we utilize those other systems to provide a quick and efficient response. Because, it's one thing to get an accurate response, but what happens next? And I think the thing that people struggle with in an active shooter event is, number one, what do the police know about the situation, right? They're responding to this structure. They don't know what's happening inside. They don't know where the event started. And then for the people that are inside the facility, what's going on? They don't know, was that a gunshot that I heard? If so, what's the plan? Where do I go? And how do we react, and who's here to help, and things like that.
And that's a really important thing, is the notification system when a gunshot goes off. Because it's like you said, you'll hear something, but you won't know what it is. And, at this point, we're so laxed on that concept is, well, somebody else will get it, or somebody else will call it, or somebody else will do something, eventually.
Yeah.
But now it's, a notification system where, yes, a gunshot went off. We verify that the gunshot went off. Everybody knows that it's a true gunshot that went off. And now we can direct authorities to the correct places where the actual shot went off, which I think is incredibly beneficial, because instead of combing through some of these facilities that are 500, 600 million square feet, and a gunshot went off, well, that really narrows it down.
Sure.
Now we have something that, so the sensor went off, it's F2, D36. Okay, right there, perfect. We have it. That's where we have to focus our forces. So now we're not combing through, which ultimately is time and lives, that now we can get to it faster.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about it is that if they don't have technology like this, statistics say that the average time that someone notifies 911 in an active shooter event is just over 3 minutes. So that's a long time for an active shooter to be in a building and no one to know about it, right? Yep. So it's crazy.
And the statistics are, isn't it one life every 10 to 15 seconds or so in an active shooter situation?
I haven't heard that statistic, but that may be true.
Okay. It's just, there's a lot that can go wrong.
Obviously.
So when you have something that's now telling you where different things are, and since it can be integrated with existing facility systems, like access control, we can control access to different parts of the building. So now we're just integrating it into their existing systems instead of trying to reinvent their wheel, when reinventing one of their facilities' wheels could be 400 doors, and, we can just put this in as another layer of protection.
That's exactly right. And, I talk to people all the time, and, I get questions about, well, I'd rather understand, that there's a gunshot or that there's a weapon in our facility before there's a gunshot, right? And so it's this discussion about, proactive versus reactive. So we can talk about that too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're right. It's, people want that either AI-based camera detection that can see that there's a weapon, but ultimately we've seen how that's failed where you're carrying a concealed firearm, a camera cannot see underneath your clothing.
Exactly.
So how do we tell you that there's a weapon in your facility? That's the main question. And then they start scratching their head thinking, well, you're right. Well, yeah, I mean, the only time that camera is going to see a gun is as soon as that gun's drawn and the trigger's pulled. Basically, that's the only time it's going to happen.
Right.
So
And then what happens?
then your response has to start working, but that means it has to go off. It has to, go through the AI level of, did it happen? And then it has to go to a human
Exactly.
to verify.
Who's supposed to be sitting at a workstation? Hopefully they are.
Hopefully they are.
Right.
Hopefully they're doing what, their job entails. And then you can give that over to the police.
Exactly.
But at that point, where did it happen? That's another question. Do they have the maps there where they know that it went off on camera 86, but police don't know where camera 86 is?
Exactly.
So, this system here is, when it goes off, it notifies.
Yeah, exactly. And, with that notification, I mean, our sensors, whether it be on the powered by alarm.com system or in some integrated enterprise level solution, the sensor detects that gunshot in less than a half a second. It notifies our software. And then typically our software is communicating with one of these other enterprise level systems, right? It's talking to a Genetec VMS, or it's talking to a software house Secure 9000 access control system. And based on where that sensor is, it's going to identify itself in that other system with location. It's typically going to visually pop up a map and show where that sensor's going off. It's also going to audibly in that system notify the operator or the person manning that workstation that a shot's been detected. And then typically it's gonna pop up associated cameras with the location of that sensor, so that, and this, CCTV systems have the ability to, roll back their recording to 5 seconds before an incident. So it can record that incident before the actual shot goes off, so you have an understanding of what color clothing the gunman's wearing, what direction they're moving, things like that.
And even, now with like those high-level systems of the Genetechs and all the AI that's based inside of them now, I mean, you can now track that individual through hundreds of cameras just by a single search.
Exactly.
Which is really incredible. And you're right, you are integrating into a complete system that's already there. But, you have the power on this side and the power on that side to make it happen correctly.
Exactly. And as soon as they identify that person, they can be going into past video and, hey, where did the gunman enter the facility, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And after seeing that live demo, when we were at the alarm.com headquarters, and seeing the enterprise demo and how it actually integrated with OpenEye, which was another one of their, alarm.com companies, it was incredible how the map is right in the center of the screen. The red dot lit up on the exact sensor that happened, and every camera on the dashboard automatically changed to find the closest ones to that area. So now we could see every angle of the situation that was happening, which, I mean, has to be incredibly beneficial for, a security operations center or, even just a small security office to say, we know that we've had a gunshot. We can visibly see everything that's happening.
Exactly.
We can lock down different places. So it's really incredible just at how our technology's working.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, for all of the active shooter events that happen across the country, and there are a lot of them, typically, every person in that building that experienced that event gets interviewed. And the common themes that they come out with is, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know where to go. No one was telling me what to do. I didn't know if I was supposed to run, hide, or fight, or do all of them. So it's a terribly frustrating experience because they don't have any information. And the ability for us to tie to these other systems and automatically push that information to first responders, whether they be a security group that's in-house or 911 first responding law enforcement personnel, and to get them information and to let them know which direction the shooter is moving within the building. It makes their response, when they get to the facility, they don't have to, be asking questions, and they can immediately go into their threat, you know, to handle the threat.
And ultimately, it's the greatest notification system that you can have in a building because it doesn't lie.
Exactly.
And, it's like we said, the other companies that have the cameras or this or, I think we went to an arena a couple weeks back. You walk through the detector there. We
Sure.
won't say what it is. And, of course I get stopped. And I'm like, okay, well, you can't bring anything into it. So you walk through, and then I look at the screen, and it points something out on the concrete right in front. And I'm like, well, I'm not even in the picture. I mean, how did it figure out how to capture me? It didn't even capture the ground. And I'm like, that's great detection systems right
Sure.
there. So it's a system that, is more reactive than, proactive, but I think it's really incredible in what it does. So can we go over a little bit actually how the detector works?
Sure. So basically, this is an interior sensor, and we have two technologies in the sensor. We have acoustic sensors that are at the top here, and they're basically listening for the sound of a gunshot on the sound spectrum, and it's evidently a very unique sound. So it's constantly listening. And then you've got these two sensors on the bottom, and these are infrared sensors. And the sensor is looking for the change of temperature from the flash of a muzzle of a weapon. And that's that significant heat displacement that comes out of that muzzle. And this sensor is looking for that. And if we don't get both of these detections, then we don't notify. And so that's really what makes us wholly unique in this industry, is that we have dual technologies in our sensor, and there are a handful of other companies that do also, but we require dual detection. So if one of these two sensors doesn't get the detection, then we don't notify, which makes us super, super accurate, right? I say to dealers all the time, because there are plenty of other guys out there that sell gunshot detection. And I say, worst day of your life is when you've got an active shooter in your building. Second worst day of your life is when you don't and you tell law enforcement that you do. Because let me tell you, they come, they respond, they're super aggressive, especially when they can't find the shooter, right?
Yeah.
So they're busting in doors and scaring people, and it's a really hectic, chaotic, scary situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that we're super proud of is that we're very accurate in our detections. And when we raise our hand and say, we've got trouble here, then you better start responding with the way you can respond.
And now we don't just have indoor sensors, there's now an outdoor sensor too available.
Exactly. And same exact technology. So we've got acoustic and we've got infrared. The big difference in the outdoor sensor is the range of detection. And so this sensor, think about this sensor as a 180-degree camera. And it can see down the hallway to the left 40 feet. It can see down the hallway to the right 40 feet, and it can see down or straight in front of it. So it's got this 40-foot radius that it covers. And so that's the coverage of the indoor sensor. The outdoor sensor, depending on the caliber of the weapon, can get out to 150 feet. So again, it's an application where you're installing that sensor on the exterior of the building. It's detecting up to 150 feet this direction, 150 feet this direction, and out front. If you were to put two of them back to back on your light poles in the parking lot, then you'd have this 300-foot diameter circle that we would protect. And both this sensor and the outdoor sensor are PoE. So they're powered over Ethernet, a simple Cat6 cable running back to a switch, power these devices. And you know, the intent of the outdoor sensor, well, it was developed because, you know, interacting with all these other systems, with all these other systems, if an outdoor sensor were able to detect a gunshot before somebody got into the facility, what do we want the facility to do? We want it to lock down, right? So we save all those people that are inside of the facility.
Yep. And I think, you know, another key word there is lockdown. And I think a lot of people have a lot of definitions of the word lockdown. Is it, you know, and that's something that you really have to discuss with your customer is, do you have a true lockdown plan? Do you understand the concept of a lockdown? I know my concept in believing it was, you know, when we would go through them is nobody in, nobody out, everybody stays where they are. If you're in a room, that's the room you're in, that door is locked, the shade's down, and that's where you're going to stay until the lockdown's over. Some people will say, well, we lock down the building, but we leave. Okay, well, that voids the purpose of a lockdown, because now if the shooter's in that gang or that group and they're all running out, nobody knows who it was, well, now we just lost, you know, the whole idea of what the lockdown was. And that's something that I really believe is a big key with your clients, to say, we're putting in a system like this, but we have to devise your solution on how you're going to act if the time comes to ever get the notification that there is an active shooter.
Yeah, and it's philosophically, it's a very difficult solution to come up with, because if you don't have enough systems involved in your building that give everyone information, and a gunshot goes off and a detection happens, and you know, what's the last thing we want to do? The last thing we want to do is lock down one of your inhabitants of your building from getting to a safe area, right, away from this gunman. So that's, we want to ensure that we don't do that. But think of a situation where you had 4 sensors in a commercial multi-tenant building, and somebody walks in off the street, security guard sitting there in the lobby, picks off the security guard. And we have the ability, because we integrate to all these other systems. This guy was coming in to shoot the HR manager who fired him yesterday, and we have the ability to immediately disable the elevators and lock down the stairwells. How many people did we just save just then? You know, that's where we want to be involved.
Everybody in every tenant space.
Exactly.
And just, it comes back to the core integrations of, you know, we can integrate with anybody now.
That's exactly right.
So that's why, you know, it's a powered by solution, which is from alarm.com, integrates very well with alarm.com. And a lot of our customers are running alarm.com, so we integrate fully. Our cameras are integrating with them, our access control. But like I said earlier, you can't go in and reinvent their entire wheel. Exactly. There's just solutions that are not sold by them, or you'd have to cobble together to actually get it to work correctly, and that's just not what we want to do. And that's where enterprise, I really think, just comes in and just does the job the way that it needs to be done. So it's really great, you know, overall. And then
it's a fun technology to represent, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's, you know, you talk to people about it and they never really understand it. And then, you know, you start showing them the sensor and they can't imagine just how small a sensor like that could be. You pull it out of your bag and they're like, no, that's not it. And I'm like, no, that's really it. That's all it is. It's a 4-inch by 4-inch sensor. It just lives dormant.
Yeah.
That's all I tell them. I say, you know, this is going to be in your ceiling and your walls. It's living dormant. It's, you know, the only time it's going to go off is if there's an issue.
It's funny because all the time I get dealers who talk to me and they're like, can you take me to one of your existing systems? And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
You know, because like, why do you want to go see this is the system right here, and this is what you're going to see.
Yep.
Because it just sits there, right? It just sits there. And until we have a really bad day, then it goes into action. And then hopefully we've got everything set up so that, it and the rest of the systems that are involved in the reaction respond the way they need to.
And we have one at one of our largest customers. I think I mentioned it on our last podcast, but we have 5 sensors installed, and it covers all their core areas, main hallways, different places outside in their garages. And I was actually walking through with their IT manager. And since we do all of the security and then the IT does all of their networking, so we're not together, but, we were walking through and he's like, you really just did such a beautiful job with all these cameras and all the wiring's beautiful. And he's like, you look at our wiring that's been, torn apart for years and years and years. And you look at yours, it's all perfect. And I said, did you see our new sensors? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we put in gunshot detection sensors throughout the facility here. And he's like, would have never known.
Yeah.
So I actually walked him through and showed him, and he's like, that's impossible that they're that small. And I'm like, no, it's, we really now have a high level of protection that the owner wanted to go with and that, the managers wanted to go with and say, it's a good solution for us.
Yeah.
It's cost effective enough that it will, easily, not pay for itself, but it's peace of mind. If you have 50 employees or 10 employees, you want to know if there's a gunshot that goes off. They all have families. You have a family. It's a workplace. It should be safe.
Sure.
And this was one of those where, we want to do it. And I'm like, that's great. So it was exciting. And I'm hoping that we get more customers on the bandwagon. We see, there can be an active shooting anywhere.
Exactly.
Any building we mentioned on our car dealership podcast, like how many disgruntled people go in there? How many disgruntled people go into a hospital or go into, your warehousing facility, or if, second shift is upset at third shift and then there's a problem, and it can happen anywhere.
Yeah. And the crazy thing about it is, I meet with dealers on a weekly basis and, I ask them, I put them in this scenario. I say, hey, let's say your best customer was, his sales were going out the roof and he was moving into a new facility across town, and he picked up the phone and he called you and he said, hey, we're moving into this new building. We have, there's absolutely no security in it. What are you going to propose that they install in that new building to secure his company? And they typically sit there and think, well, I'm going to put in access control, video, and maybe some intrusion. And I'm like, I'm right. See what this is right here? I'm like, I'm right here. And then I follow it up with, tell me when the best time is to install gunshot detection. And they think, and they go, well, hopefully before there's a shooter in your building. And I'm like, exactly. So you got to do it now, right? I mean, because you can't predict when a shooter is coming into your building. It's got to be now. And so you've got to start thinking about this solution and this technology on every sales call you go on, because it's integral. And the time to put it in is not after somebody has come in and shot people in your building.
And I know people think that as soon as they put it in, they're inviting them. They're inviting their facility to have a problem. And it's really hard to turn a customer's mind off of that and say, we're not inviting a problem, we're adding a solution that can react to the problem. Exactly. And they just can't seem to get that out, that they're inviting it. So
well, and the other thing is, there's a big fear that, well, if we tell people we've got gunshot detection in our facility, then it's going to make them feel like they're unsafe. Why do you need gunshot protection in this facility? And so there's there's some hurdles, right? We got to get past those hurdles. And the system ultimately was designed to save lives, and that doesn't mean it's going to save every life, right? Because we are a reactive solution. But I get people that we talk about the two technologies and the requirement of 2 detections, and I get what about a silencer or Um, and all the tests that we've done, we're pretty good with silencers. We detect a lot of them. Can't get all of them. You put a silencer on a 22, and it barely sounds like your dog coughed. Um, so but the system was intended to save all those other lives once a bad incident occurs, and I think we respond to that extremely well.
Yep, compared to some of the others out there that say that they have it and then they use one microphone. And that's, you look at, I was talking to a few people who were like, well, we had the detectors and we'd get false gunshot notifications. And he's like, well, we'd get 20 a day. I'm like, 20 a day?
Yeah.
20 a day? And he's like, well, then it became unreliable. And now every time one comes through, we just ignore it.
Exactly.
And I'm like, well, and there is the textbook case of now you're letting it go. So now you have no idea if there is a gunshot, if there's not a gunshot, and something's lying to you.
Exactly.
And how can you lie when you may have a student population of 30,000 or 60,000 or whatever it is now, and you got something lying to you?
Exactly. I had a university that called me, and they said, we have an existing technology, gunshot detection technology, and we're getting false alarms. And so they asked me to come out and talk to them, and I did. And they were very curious about the sensor and the requirement of dual detection. And I asked them, I said, give me an idea of some of the things that have set your system off. And the guy just shook his head, and he said one time we had a garbage truck outside that its air brakes hit, like the sound
Yep.
of the air brakes on the garage truck, a garbage truck. And he said it set off our outdoor sensor. I was like, oof, that's a little rough, And I said, what else? He said, well, one time somebody was walking down the hall, and those little aluminum protectors of the corners of sheetrock that they put up, and somebody hit that, and it bounced off the floor, and it set off their gunshot detection. And so you do, if you have a system that's doing that, you're forced to kind of ignore it, right? Because you'd have everyone in hysteria a lot.
Every minute of every day.
Yeah.
And the kids, and that's really bad for the kids now, because the kids, they're just trying to focus on studies or whatever they're doing. And now, oh, we had a gunshot alert today. And it has to be notified.
Sure.
And then now they're not trusting it. So now you're bringing the youth into not trusting a very real issue in the facility. So it's not just, hitting the administrators, it's hitting every single soul in the facility. And if you have something that's giving you false alarms, I mean, it's like you said, it's false alarms are the worst. And as soon as you start not realizing and just letting them fly out the window,
it becomes boy cried wolf.
Yep, every time.
Exactly.
And then, the administrators who are supposed to be there to, administrate, well, oh, we think we had one.
Exactly.
Okay, well, we think or we know.
Exactly.
And if you tie that into the police and you have 5 false detections a week, I mean, the police are going to be like, oh, it's probably just another false one today.
Exactly.
Well, the false one's going to be the real one.
Exactly.
So, the industries that it's used in, I mean, where do you see the biggest growth for SDS to be installed?
It's kind of crazy because everyone thinks K through 12, right? And obviously, if school districts had all the money in the world, this would be a priority for them, but they don't. And I tell people all the time, everyone says, okay, so you're K through 12, and I'm just like, we are K through 12, but we're also on the unsecure side of airports. Really, the main indicator is, where does a mass shooter want to go? They want to go where there's mass people, right? So on the unsecure side of an airport where you're checking in for your flight and doing all, there's a lot of people in there.
Yep.
And they don't have the luxury of not allowing people into the airport if they don't, have a badge or things like that. So it's a very public place. So So we have a decent presence in airports. Think about courthouses in municipalities where the public's coming in. Someone may be making a judgment that you may be going to jail, or your brother was sentenced the other day. Places that are affecting, families' lives. That's a big one. Um, so any type of headquarter environment where you've got a good portion of your leadership at this location, but it is a public building. So we're in a lot of multi-tenant commercial buildings. We're in a lot of HQ Fortune 500 buildings. We're getting heavily involved in infrastructure, utility locations, substations, and things like that. Because when these systems go down, it affects a company's bottom line and their profitability, and so they got to know. And is it an active shooter there? I mean, think about a substation, and all of a sudden a system goes down. They don't know why. Some of these systems are 2 to 3 hours away from, anybody in their company. What if you were able to detect a gunshot and deploy a drone at that substation to immediately go over to this area and look at where that shot was detected, and we see that there's, a hunter that's in the vicinity, or a truck that took off and is going down the road. I mean, all of that type of information can be valuable in the response to, a company's infrastructure.
And I think we saw that a couple months ago where there were a couple people firing on substations.
Exactly.
And, they don't know who it was, but that disturbance took out 6,000 homes. Now, it's a free-for-all. If they don't have generators or they don't have something else, you could technically go after any of them then. So it's a big security risk, but now you have somebody firing on the substation.
Exactly.
Which is where, the electric companies, they have every other piece of technology, and they don't have now, I think, the most important. I mean, before it was thermal, seeing along the gate, they had the electrified gates or the, wire through the gate, and if you
Sure.
shook it, it worked. Now we can't detect gunshot.
Exactly.
So now you have another layer that they must add, or they could, suffer major consequences, and their customers can suffer major consequences.
Exactly. And why would you want to deploy a human to go investigate that when you could do it with technology?
Yep, and the drones are really becoming incredible. I know, especially after seeing the Sunflower,
Mm-hmm.
which Alarm.com brought in, and that's just a miraculous piece of technology. Just at how we're expanding the parameters of how we can secure a facility, and instead of putting a human life at risk, and the human facet of are they on vacation, are they not there, are they afraid, are they not going to go near? I mean, we all have that. This is a drone that runs, pretty much 24/7. Could be 4 trips an hour, and it can patrol.
Exactly.
Go to where something happens, covers the facility correctly, and ultimately, if it gets shot, well, okay, I lost a drone, but I didn't lose a human life.
Exactly.
And technology is replaceable, but having the correct solutions in place is just a really incredible facet. And all of these systems work together, and that's where the integration key comes back to this. And we do that full circle of we can do land, air, maybe sea at some point, whatever else we need to get to the actual site of the incident. So, it's an essential item, I think, for businesses. And I think even small businesses, I mean, what's your take on them having a system like this in place?
Well, I think about customers that maybe have 6 preschools across a little regional city. You put one sensor in each one of those little preschools, and you have a good, solid understanding if there's a gunshot. I mean, and we can immediately notify 911. They can respond to those incidents. How about a regional bank that's got 40 branches? Hey, one sensor in each one of the lobbies of those branches, and you have the ability to protect your employees because Like we said, someone comes in and fires off a shot just to get everyone's attention in a branch. It means, hey, we're serious.
Yep.
Now we've already communicated to 911. They already understand where the facility is, what the location is. No one's had to press their panic button, right? So the police are on a roll, and there's no requirement for human involvement to notify the police at that point in time.
And there's a response that is different than a panic.
Exactly.
I mean, with a gunshot, you are relaying to, if we are on the enterprise side, to a security operations center, but we can also go out to 911 if we need to as well. So we have that, two paths of communication.
Sure.
On the other side, if it is a powered by solution, it is going right to the operator. But now the operator knows this was a gunshot.
Exactly.
So now you're getting a totally different response level than they pressed a panic button. Now, yeah, panic button will get you a good amount of people.
Sure.
But a gunshot will get you everybody.
Well,
Everybody available is really what that detector is going to give us.
I literally talked to a dealer yesterday who was trying to integrate a panic button solution into his gunshot detection solution. And he wanted to do it through a different system. And he wanted to take all of these panic buttons that were in his facility and put them into one alarm zone, right? One single alarm zone, and communicate it back to the access control system and call it gunshot detection. And I'm like, that's not a good idea.
Because now you have no idea where it is happening.
Not only do you not know where it's happening, but somebody sees a panic button and some guy slaps his wife and they push the panic button because, hey, he shouldn't be hitting his wife. Somebody needs to come respond to this. Well, if the security center sees gunshot detection, now it's crazy, right?
Yep.
Now the response is crazy. So, you have to be careful on how we're responding, and technology is great, but there are all types of angles in the reaction and the responses that we make, and you have to be considerate of all those things.
And the panic buttons, that's another. We redid one that had 16 panic buttons across 2 different floors, and the problem is, well, where did it go off? I mean, you have rooms upstairs, you have rooms downstairs, and he's like, well, that's just how the other people did it, because I guess it was easy. And I said, well, this is not easy. It's, we don't know where anything happened. So we redid it, and I think we have 16 on 16 zones now.
Exactly.
Because now you're giving the exact location of the incident. If you're tying in all of them together, you'll never figure out what happened and where it happened. So now it's like, okay, well, this, if it's a bank, okay, teller 1 went off. What's wrong, teller 1? Now we know.
Exactly.
Instead of it could have been teller 86, and, we really don't know where it happened. And if the police get there, you're only going to have them in a frenzy because, and then you look, not the smartest with the police because they're like, well, really?
This is your facility.
This is your facility.
You need to know what's going on.
This is what you give us? Is this? So the panic buttons, I think, they're not going away. They're still very prevalent. But I think adding a system like this is now giving you the, regards to the, the way it's working and the way your facility's working.
Sure.
You're not inviting it. I mean, I think everybody's like, oh, well, you're inviting it. You're not. You're putting cameras in. So what, are you inviting theft?
That's exactly right.
You're putting in panic buttons, so you're inviting a holdup?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, now that we start to think about it that way, we're not really inviting anything. You're already putting in these proactive solutions. We're just adding a different one.
Exactly.
But I think the small businesses can also benefit from it too. And, even the little schools and different things like that, churches.
No doubt. And with some of the stuff that Alarm.com is coming out with right now, I mean, you think about this artificial intelligence in their cameras, that the deterrence part.
Yeah.
Where their AI is able to determine through the video picture, what somebody's wearing, and, can pipe down through the speaker to that person and say, hey, you're in a bad area. Are you the one in the red hood? That's powerful. Mm-hmm. And when someone understands that, number one, someone's watching me. Number two, they can identify what I'm wearing. that stuff is powerful, and that doesn't involve a human. And all those types of things can be incorporated into a response, right? So
The AI level is incredible. I have one of their floodlights now, and just walking up to it when the system's armed and having it fully identify what you're wearing and telling you to leave, and like really not just a generic leave. It's
right,
you in the blue jacket and tan pants. This is a restricted area. Please leave. And now comparing to some of the other cameras that we've sold over the years, you're like, we're light years behind. And those older cameras that may have some AI in them, it's too complicated to operate. It's really not that good because it's, if anything is working like that, that's $200 and has it built in, it really can't be that good.
exactly.
And now you have something working off of their servers and their teachings, and they're really just moving the industry, I think, even further and further every day. I think Ubiquiti is another big one too, with how all of their cameras are working and their AI analytics. And AI is unfortunately the future.
It's crazy, and the pace at which it's advancing, because it's constantly grabbing all the data that it's looking at, right? And so it's getting smarter every day, and it just compounds itself.
And
so,
you're training it. I mean, before, I remember we would have to train it. You'd have to say, well, this is a person, so click
exactly
on a person.
right.
And it was very primitive. I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago with IC Real Time. They had a device called Ella, and you'd put Ella on the network, and Ella would start looking at the system and the cameras, and you'd have to physically go in every day and say FedEx, 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 and then do that about 10 more times, and it'd be like, that's FedEx.
Yeah.
So you'd have to person. That's a person. Okay, so you'd have to train it. And today, we're not training anything. It's just learning and it's consuming. And you see what ChatGPT does. You see what everything else is, and just it's incredible the response. And they're becoming more humanized. Before it was like the broken English of please move area out, and you'd be like, okay, I get it. And now it's fluent. So
exactly.
those
Yeah.
are really big keys, I think, in how we secure our facilities and how we make sure that we are protected from pretty much anything out there, from gunshots to burglaries and intrusions to slip and falls outside, where now we're catching everything.
Yeah.
Um,
And when you talk about just installing and it working, that's the great thing about these sensors, is there is no configuration to these sensors. I mean, you connect it to power and it works. There's no messing with the calibration of any of the sensors, whether it be the poweredbyalarm.com solution or the enterprise level solution. These sensors just work, and they're very, very accurate.
and that's not to mention that we don't test our sensors.
Exactly.
So we actually do test them, not with a gun, but we do test them with an actual tester. We have one out on the table outside, and it will just seal the sensor. It plays its little sounds, and it does test the IR light. And after that, we know that our sensor's tested and it's operational, which we recommend to do every 6 months. I believe you can do it yearly, but you are having a sensor that does save lives, so just test it every 6 months.
Yeah, we say that at minimum, annual testing. The nice thing about the sensors, though, they do communicate back with our software every on the enterprise side. They're communicating every 10 seconds to say, "Hey, I'm out here. You good?" We have good communication. So, and it was funny when I was installing my first demo system. I have a live fire demo system that I can take around and do live fire demos with folks. I have these 2 tripods that I put the sensors on, and they have the little like iPhone clips that
Yep.
you clip your camera on, and I just clip the sensors in there, and so I've powered them up. They go to my switch. I've got the software on, and all of a sudden one of my sensors is yellow, and I'm like, well, what? It's communicating. Wonder why it's yellow. And I go into the log files, and it says basically it was kind of leaning forward, so it wasn't exactly like vertical, and so it was telling me, hey, put it up against the wall, dummy. So
Something's wrong.
exactly. And so, but it typically tells you what's wrong.
Yep, and that's nice. I don't think we have that on the alarm.com side. I think it's it will send you, if there's a trouble, it'll send you a trouble. I never got to work on the enterprise side. Hopefully we do with one of
I
our
hope
projects.
you do too. So does Mike.
So it's really neat. The only thing I found with it was everybody tells me it fits in a standard 2-gang junction box.
Is that a lie?
That's the biggest lie I've ever been told.
Okay.
Okay, so when I did the project, of course it was on a Saturday, because that's when you can get into the facility and start working. And I cut all the holes for the boxes and they're ceiling tiles. Now, the ceiling tiles are old. They're like 30 years old. They're yellowed. So you can't just go buy another one. Like, the game is over as soon as it's cut, because if you put a bright white, you almost got to, like, paint it like that smoke-stained yellow. Like, you go to Home Depot. I need a smoke-stained yellow to paint that. But I fought with these to try and get them to fit. And I'm like, well, they just really don't fit. So I guess, I don't know how other installers are doing it. I don't know if they're just cutting it, fastening this with 4 drywall screws and calling it a day in the wall, or if they're, because I cut apart all my brackets. I started hollowing them out and everything. And I'm like, this is just too difficult. But I don't know what everybody else is using.
I'd have to put you in touch with my technical guys in Rowley.
I'm like, because then I went to the electrical supply house, and I'm good friends with them. So I'm like, I just got to go back. I got to test every box that you have in this building. So I'm walking through, and they're like, well, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm opening every box here to figure out what fits this. And I found that an outdoor electrical box will fit this. So that's actually what we use, because I'm like, well, it has to look nice and fit. So that worked for us. So if other installers out there are having a problem, it's probably not just you. It's not even that. It's like 1/8 of an inch off.
Oh gosh.
But you know that it doesn't stretch.
Sure.
So then you try and like jam it in, and you're like, well, this isn't right. So hopefully, unless somebody's got a recommendation,
I'll definitely talk to our folks about that.
just shave it down a little bit.
Right.
But you're right. It's then also using the correct switches. So like when we are speccing a system, we are speccing, you want the best equipment. I think we spec Netgear Nighthawk switches. So even though they're very expensive, they have the correct power output for us, and they also are, Netgear. You can have a switch from Netgear that's run like 20 years, and
I have a TP-Link PoE switch,
and they just run.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the older stuff was made better.
Well, it may have been.
So it's, and I think educating consumers, educating on liability, and the risk management before, having an active shooting situation is really good. And, I think it's an incredible product. And I'm really excited that we get to sell it on the powered by side. Hopefully we get to move to the enterprise side at some point. Maybe we can get a school or something.
Yeah. When the situations present themselves, you'll know it. Because again, it's really dependent on the systems that are in place at the facility as to how you react to it. You could put in a shooter detection systems by itself, and you would get the same detection, the same accuracy. You would have the ability to pull up a map and show and identify exactly where that shot goes off. And we would immediately send that signal to a 24/7 central station that is then in contact with 911 first responders. So there is a solution that sits by itself, but I encourage people all the time, if you have other capable systems in your facility, it's well worth utilizing those technologies that you've already spent money on to react in the most professional and efficient way.
Yep, and I want to also clear that up with, there was the old time tale of, if it was powered by, it was up to 50 cents, and then after that it was the enterprise level. And that's really just not true, because now they can go up to any sensor, and they're really for installations that don't have many security products or now want to, really start inventing their way of security in their business. And that's where, you can have cameras and access control and tie everything together. But for a larger customer, even if they need 5 sensors, but they have a Genetec system running, or they have Hanwha inside the building, or they have, access control, or they have something else that integrates with enterprise, we're going to start moving to the enterprise side. It's only going to do them a service by utilizing the key components, but the powered by side is going to stick with their ecosystem, which I think is totally fine. And you see a ton of people, millions of people using alarm.com out there. So, they stick with theirs and we stick with ours. It's not separate. It's not really a true sensor count. It's just what is going to work best for our customer and their needs.
Yeah. And you're exactly right, because like I have a small school district in East Texas, and I think their total number of sensor counts is 16. It's 2 small schools, but they do have an enterprise level access control system, and so they've chosen to go that direction. But the same thing goes in reverse with the powered by alarm.com solution. You could have a 900 location, one sensor at each location application with that scenario, but you would just have to basically cut down your solution into regions so that there may be 50 locations in this region, and you would have that solution there.
Yep.
But it is that powered by alarm.com, because they have alarm.com cameras and access control and stuff like that.
And they have their multi-location management enterprise console, which is great. And this is just, what is going to work best. I mean, we really have to do what's best for our customer. And if they are already running it, and you got to think, some of these other systems are hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
To put in those cameras, or, if you're working with the Avigilons or the Hanwhas or Axis, they've spent tons of money. And you just go right towards them with, this is a system, this is what we recommend. And even if they just wanted something as gunshot detection, said, can we do the powered by to save, some of our monthly cost or yearly cost? You can. You're losing the integrations, but you can certainly do that if, you did want to save some of the cost.
Yeah. Yeah, and, let's face it, there are a ton of systems out there that are really smart, right? We're looking at a technology right now that they call it a wayfinding system. So it's a series of strobes that are mounted in the public areas of your facility. And based on the location of one of our sensors when it goes off, if an inhabitant in that building looks down the hallway this way and all the sensors are red, meaning the shot came from down here, and I look down the hallway this direction and they're all green, it visually tells me where to go, right? So those types of technologies are not something that everyone has installed, but they are a technology that has the ability to take an alarm input, right?
Yep.
And that's really all that we need to talk to your system, is for us to be able to say, hey, we got a bad situation. Now do what you can do. And based on where my sensor is, we're going to do these things. And that could be interacting with a mass notification system. It could be interacting with a public address system. These wayfinding systems, these drones. I'm sure you're familiar with technology and you understand these fogging technologies.
Yes, they're very big in Europe.
I
hope they come
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah. So to me, if I were in your shoes, like I would talk to every single jeweler that was out there about these fogging systems, because, if you can't see what you're stealing, it's hard to steal stuff, right?
Yep.
So we can talk to those type systems, and so it really gets ridiculously large as to what your response could be if you had all these technologies at your fingertips.
And you bring up jewelry stores. I think it's an excellent product for them.
Yes, exactly.
I don't know why we don't kind of push that harder. I mean, we really think of the educational levels, the corporate levels, but back to the main businesses like the jewelry stores, the Chick-fil-A's, all the businesses.
Think of the pawn shops that are out there.
Oh my God.
I mean,
Yeah,
they have guns right in their place,
Even gun stores.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, somebody comes in and wants a gun and pulls their gun. Well, we never thought to have a gunshot detector in a gun store.
Right.
So that's there's so many use cases. And even if you think your business isn't a use case, you can probably talk to somebody who could say, yeah, you should have it.
Exactly.
I mean, cost is not, I wouldn't say it's extravagant for something like this. You know, for a small business, you could get away with a couple sensors. And even if it's on the powered by side, I mean, monthly cost is very reasonable. We have a cell communicator, which uses dual path communication, so cellular and, Ethernet, so it is connected two ways. And it's very cost effective.
Yeah.
The enterprise side, I know that you got to build the server that can handle the amount of sensors, and then the sensors are enterprise sensors or powered by sensors. They don't mix.
They do not mix.
Okay.
So yeah, the basic architecture of the enterprise system is you have your server, you've got your sensors out in the field. So we have the interior PoE sensor, we've got an exterior PoE sensor, and then we also have a wireless version that's interior only. So basically, those three technologies go back to a switch that's on the customer network. On that customer network is our server that houses the SDS software. So sensors communicate with the switch communicates with the software, and then the software basically does 5 things, and it basically has the ability to work with our maps and identify where the detection took place. It's communicating with other client workstations. It's communicating with Noonlight, which is our 911 automation communication to 911 centers. And then it through hardware relays, it's communicating with systems that we don't have SDK integration with. And then with SDK integration to our enterprise level systems, we're communicating software to software. So that's really, we want to be, at the end of the day, we just want to be that sensor on that map in that enterprise whatever system that you have. So that, and let's be real. If you install our system on a workstation, how often are you going to interact with that system? You're not, because you're going to sit there and you're going to stare at that blank screen until you have a gunshot, right?
Yep.
And it doesn't happen, thankfully.
Yes.
Right? But if it ever does, we want it to come up in a system that you're familiar with, that you work with on an everyday basis, and that takes all the rest of those capabilities of those systems and reacts based on where that sensor is in what part of the building.
And that's the way it should be. It should just integrate easily, and your user has to be familiar.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't just teach somebody, oh, this is what it should look like. They have to really interact with the system. So you got to give them something they're familiar with.
Yep.
So it's so good that we have something like this that now we can finally bring out. We have every different scenario covered, whether we need to do outdoor sports fields for sporting events, or
you were talking a little bit about going into one of your stadiums.
Yeah.
And I had the very same exact experience. I was up in Boston and went to a game at Fenway, and I walked through the sensor out on the street. I walked through the sensor, and I turned around and I looked, and there were about, I don't know, 500 people out there. And I'm like, and we have a presence in Major League Baseball, and I called the person I was talking to, and I said, hey, I just went to a game the other day, and I walked to your sensor that was out on the street, and I said, so you feel pretty good that, feel pretty confident that, your patrons aren't coming into the stadium with a weapon, right? He's like, yeah. I said, what about the 500 people that were behind me waiting in line to get in? He said, it scares me so bad. And I said, guess what? We just came out with an outdoor sensor. And so we're talking to some of the stadium owners about stuff like that.
And it's a great idea, because that's all unprotected area.
Exactly.
We're more concerned about unprotected area than protected area.
Exactly.
And even look at what cities are doing. It's I know that the Chicago SDS side is really going to be incredible down there. I've heard a lot about ShotSpotter in our area here.
Is it installed here?
Yes.
It is?
Norristown has, I think, 50 stations.
Okay.
So they get, I think, 100 alerts a day. Um,
Are alerts, are you saying that they're actual gunshots or?
a lot of the time, they're actual gunshots.
Okay.
So they'll send an officer. I guess they have a force that goes out and goes, and they have them down to where the casings are. So they'll be like, yeah, we have casings. And then, what do you do after that? There's nobody there.
Sure.
They narrow it down to a good bit, but there's a lot of stations. And now knowing what you're actually looking at, you can see what's going on. So I'm really excited to see how SDS plays in that city, because hopefully we can bring it to cities around us.
Yeah.
And continually integrate what's actually happening, and even big Metroplex parking lots. I mean, why wouldn't you want to have something there? So
Exactly. Yeah. We'll see how the development of that goes. We're still, the outdoor sensor is still beta. We're collecting a ton of data. I just had a dealer in the Dallas area install a couple sensors in downtown Dallas, and I live out there. So when I get back, we're going to take a couple different, 3 different caliber weapons, and we're going to go shoot blanks out in the parking lots, and 50 feet, 100 feet, 150 feet at different angles and see how much data we can collect. We're also talking about, for facilities like these convention centers, like if you've ever been up to the Javits Center at IC East,
yep.
That's a huge place, right? And these sensors typically we state that they cover about 2,500 square feet. Well,
We need about 700 of them.
yeah, exactly. Pretty expensive, right?
Pretty expensive.
Yeah. So what if we could put an outdoor sensor in an indoor application?
Yep.
And so we're looking at solutions like that.
Even school gyms. I mean, big field houses,
Mhm.
big indoor arenas. I mean, you could never. I mean, you probably could, but by the time you get them all on the ceiling, and then the heights aren't going to work.
Yeah,
because-
you'd have to bring them down
Yep.
to get to certain.
Isn't it around, I think, 10 to 12 feet?
This we suggest 9 to 12 feet on this
Okay.
one, 15 to 18 feet on the outdoor.
So even if you did them on the walls, around a stadium or around an area, they could cover what you needed to cover. So hopefully that is something that changes, because I see, just trying to cover big areas
Of course, yeah.
will be really neat.
Yep.
But it's so nice to see so many developments on this front. And I'm so happy that we got to actually spend time together today and have this, because I think it's really beneficial to just show everybody out there, tell everybody out there, what the enterprise side does that Powered by doesn't, and really give them an idea of why we should be using this sensor and how this can benefit any business from any different, variation. So,
Sure, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so that was another great episode of The Green Room. I really hope you enjoyed this one, and we have another exciting episode coming up in the next 2 weeks, so that's going to be great. And I really want to thank Bob here for coming up and doing this with us. So it was really great, and stay tuned for the next one.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you very much, Harry.
Thank you.